And this could just be the defining image of LA in 2025. There appears to be a Waymo stuck on Spring Street here, right behind this massive and growing crowd of protesters outside of City Hall. Traffic is impacted through much of downtown. You definitely want to avoid Spring Street, where we're showing you this demonstration right now in front of City Hall. The 101, we did see closures earlier in the day. Heavy traffic right now at First Street, where these protesters were marching earlier in the day. That is open now. That's probably your best alternate instead of taking Spring. You can take First to get around it and get onto North Broadway. Instead, you see cars at this corner doing just that to get around this large group of protesters shutting down this street and now spilling into the park across the street. LAPD is still circling overhead, keeping an eye on this. We don't see officers or troops on the ground, but we imagine they are in the area keeping an eye on this demonstration and any others that might pop up. You saw people in the crowd applauding just there. It looks like leaders of this demonstration, this mass mobilization, standing on the steps of City Hall, are speaking right now. We're turning a little bit in News Chopper 4 just to get a better look at that. And I do apologize for any profanity we're showing on these signs that protesters are holding up. But you see quite a few of them. We noted this too when they were marching west on First Street. You see several of them that say F ICE, but of course that is spelled out on their signs, which is why we're being careful to shoot this somewhat wide. And we've seen that same language graffitied on buildings on the side of the federal building and the sign out front. And if you look over here toward the southwest, it looks like more people are walking up or biking up and joining this crowd outside of City Hall. And as I give you this super wide shot here, this bird's eye view, you can see just how large this crowd is as people continue joining. We don't know if they have plans to march to another location or join with any other groups that are out protesting right now. Unclear how long this group plans to stay here, but again, a mass mobilization protesting federal immigration enforcement activities in LA. They're calling for ICE to get out of their local communities. Hey, Desk, do you want us to wrap the stream here and head back? These protesters now on the move, and we do need to get back to base as well in News Chopper 4. We need to refuel and go through a shift change, but we will be right back with you following this demonstration as they march along Spring Street, now leaving the steps of City Hall.
Edry. Okay, okay. Got him. I got him. Choppers overhead, choppers overhead, choppers overhead. Wonderful. I'm having a problem with. I got you on the 450. Go ahead. Okay, copy that. Let me know when. George? So, okay, I didn't know we were going to fly directly over, so okay, so this is the shot that I need right now. I am shooting at my 5 o'clock. Okay. Okay, I copy that. Okay, they're going to be taking our shot live in about 3 minutes. So I just need to get back around and get into position where we can get this, the majority of this crowd here. Okay. We're 2 minutes to our live shot. Okay, and if we, when we get into position, if we could just post up, that would be great. Are we hot? 1 minute, cut, copy. We're hot on Telemundo. What was that, George? Yeah. Clear from Telemundo. LAPD declares unlawful assembly. ICE protests escalate. CanX has 3 reporters on scene. Oh, okay, that's... Okay. those flags down there I've never even seen before. They're going onto the freeway. You copying this, desk? How low can we get, George? Okay. Stopping traffic. Ooh. They're on the freeway. Officer down, hit with a rock, Alameda and Temple. Okay, can we, let's see here. Can we come to the left? Wait a minute. Don't do that yet. Don't do that yet. So I need to be able to keep an eye on this skirmish line. George, can we swing around a little bit to the right a little bit and just scoot right? Because I'm losing my visuals of the freeway activity. But we're hot on Telemundo. Stand by. Don't move. Yep, that's the 101 freeway. Copy that. I got you in the booth. Standing by. Was that clear, Telemundo? Still hot. George, this position here is perfect. If you cannot move, this is perfect. Yeah, 321 News Chopper 4 over downtown LA. News Chopper 4. Hey, is this Kathy? Hey guys, how you guys? How you doing? We're hanging a lot unfolding here right now. Okay, you got it. Copy that. It's going to be the 101 and Alameda. 101 and Alameda. Standing by. George, scoot back right just a little bit. Standing by. Okay. Out of control, and this has just really unfolded probably in the last 15 or 20 minutes. And I think it was probably the last 30 or 40 minutes that LAPD declared this an unlawful assembly, and after that happened, all hell seemed to have broken loose here in the downtown area with scores of people going onto the 101 freeway. This is going to be the north, or rather the southbound side of the 101 freeway. right at Alameda, and just a lot of people holding up traffic and so forth as my helicopter pilot tries to jockey and get into place here. I'm going to try and show you some of the traffic backup that has taken place here, blocking traffic for actually quite a ways. And as I push into this shot here, you can see this is going to be, I'll have to see what this cross street here. This is a Liso near the freeway. Liso's the frontage road that goes right alongside the 101 freeway, and this is going to be, I believe, at Spring Street, and you can just see just a sea of human beings all over the place here. And as I pull out of the shot here, I just want to push in briefly. You can see LAPD trying to reclaim this intersection right here. They've got a skirmish line established in just a couple of minutes ago before you guys came to us, and you can see officers now advancing, pushing people back away from the intersection. We saw a lot of pushing and shoving starting to take place as officers try and keep hold of this intersection and keep just this virtual sea of human beings from taking over this area, guys. Yeah, I believe so. At this point, all bets are off as far as a peaceful demonstration and so forth. And I just wanted to illustrate to you the traffic tie-up that this is causing. This is really going to mess up traffic on the 101 freeway. And I believe, unless I'm wrong, I don't believe we've actually seen any of these crowds go onto the freeway. I think this might be the first of this third day of protest that we have seen occurring here in Los Angeles County. But take a look at just people all over the place here. It's spans from one overpass to another overpass, and then as you go up Spring Street, they're just all over the place there as well. Now we have not, we've tried to see what some of the signs say. There was one big banner that said something to the effect of that spoke very specifically about Trump. I don't want to repeat the language that was used there, but very vocal, using their banners and so forth. They've got their flags, and I was just mentioning to my pilot, there are flags that I'm seeing being displayed here that I've never seen before, actually. There's the Mexican flag, and there have been several other flags that are being displayed here, but clearly a demonstration by many people from the Latin community who are very upset about what is taking place. Right, exactly, and I'm going to use my doubler here, and we're up quite a bit of ways because there is there's a ice airship that's down below us, and we cannot get any closer. So my shot is going to be a little on the grainy side, a little bit on the blurry side. I apologize for that, but yes, we did see a couple of law enforcement vehicles go onto the freeway. They almost had to push themselves onto the freeway. And I don't know where they went after that. I believe that they were CHP vehicles. They could have been LAPD vehicles. But at this point in time, I don't know what the strategy is to try and get these people off the freeway. They may have been going up ahead just to block off traffic and what have you, or to coordinate taking people off the freeway once they get it cleared. We just don't know. But definitely a strategy is going to have to be established here to try and get all these people off the freeway that are backing up traffic. I've seen primarily LAPD. I think the two law enforcement vehicles that went onto the freeway may have been CHP, but I can't confirm that. But it definitely a very strong and robust presence of LAPD down here right now, providing uh, uh, security, if you will, for this intersection, trying to get people cleared off. Of course, as we just discussed, they declared this an unlawful assembly, so they're trying to push people back away from perhaps the Roybal Center, as you just described, keep them away from this intersection, and provide force protection for any of the ICE immigration officers that may be down here as well. Yeah, I know it's super blurry, but we can't get any closer. I've tried to get closer to the shot, but we're way up here. George, is there any? Still had. Gotcha. Sticking with this shot. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, stand by, George. Did you copy that? Okay. Say again. So Alameda and Temple, 2000, double that. Alameda and Temple, 2000, double that on the freeway. How much closer can we get? Yeah. And is the ICE airship still under us? Okay. So we got a sheriff ship and a ICE ship. Okay. Idaho 80. Who's that? Okay. Okay. Yeah, Jonathan, what a difference just a few minutes make. CHP getting on scene with, if you will, multiple officers, several squads of officers getting on scene. You saw all those vehicles parked back behind that underpass, and they seem now to be getting activated. They're up underneath this underpass right now, and as I pull out of the shot, it would seem that their bullseye right now is going to be these people that are still on the freeway trying to get them off the freeway. Now, they have managed to turn around a number of the vehicles that were trapped on the freeway. They actually had to turn around and go the wrong way on the southbound side going northbound to get them off the freeway. So quite the coordinated effort from CHP, and I would anticipate their next focus is going to try and get all these bodies off the freeway. Say again?
It has moved over and now converged onto the freeway, what has started over about 2 blocks away near the Federal Detention Center.
Yeah, this is all the result of several planned protests, and now it's just, chaos there over the 101. It doesn't appear to be moving much, Lolita. As far as officers on the ground, are you seeing, is it LAPD? Is it National Guard? Is it other agencies as well?
I will tell you, the only folks that we're seeing are the ones that you see there right on the 101 freeway. I'm going to keep walking around. I'm with a security person as well, making sure that we stay safe here. And I don't see and have not seen police officers on the ground around us. We have seen them on top of buildings. They are around multiple buildings here along this area, sort of visualizing from the top down. These are LAPD officers looking down from both some of the buildings that we see around the area. But in terms of actual vehicles, LAPD vehicles or police officers kind of in the area, no. And I will tell you, too, that while it is quite chaotic there on the 101 freeway, we're walking down the sidewalks here on Aliso in Los Angeles. There are young people, old people, elderly people that had come out to protest here peacefully. There are people with their dogs. And they're moving about in this direction. So, no one feels necessarily nervous, or no one feels necessarily in any type of threatening situation, even though it is definitely chaotic and there are lots of people around.
Yeah, what I see now, I wanted to ask you about the mood, what you're seeing about the mood of the crowd right now, how you would describe it. But I'm seeing a lot of just repositioning, people moving around a lot. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and that's what's been happening all day. Like I said, we were up at City Hall about 3-4 blocks away when we heard that there was an unlawful demonstration called on by the LAPD that was on our website, NBCLA.com. We then walked down to see what that looked like, and that's near the Roybal Federal Building. We were there on Alameda and watching dispersed folks there. That was where we first saw flashbangs and smelled it in the air as well. Then everything moved towards the freeway. So it is as if they're trying to shift folks away from certain areas and close off a different direction, but then it just spills into the freeway, and this is where it can, for many ways, become very dangerous. But if you're on the sidewalk and you're just talking to people with their signs and their messaging, and the folks that we have talked to before, they're keeping calm, and no one's trying to necessarily become part of what's happening on the 101 there. They're just, they're here for what they came for, which is to ask for transparency in the immigration detention, to find out what's going on with those that are being detained, and to, have more transparency in terms of the license that they have, here in the United States. And so what we're looking at right now, at least from where I'm standing, and I'm right here at Los Angeles and Aliso, right next to the 101, it seems quite calm. In terms of people, it looks like just people walking. People are just people watching what's happening there on the freeway. That's actually it.
Our Lolita Lopez there on the ground. Lolita, stay with us on the phone and stay safe out there. Right now, we want to get to NBC's David Noriega. He's also in downtown LA. David, thank you for being with us here. Tell us your location and exactly what you've been seeing unfold over the last several minutes.
Yeah, guys, so I am at the intersection of Alameda and Temple. The group you're seeing behind me of protesters is a group of protesters that came from City Hall, tried to descend on the Metropolitan Detention Center in the federal building, which is about 100 yards, 200 yards maybe that way, but were pushed back by LAPD. The MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, that is where the National Guard troops are stationed, who are deployed here against the wishes of Governor Newsom. These protesters, really, the protest was targeted at them. It was targeted at the National Guard troops and at DHS, which also has a police presence there alongside the National Guard troops. But they were repelled. They were pushed back here by LAPD, which in just the last hour or so declared this an unlawful assembly and has been pushing protesters back, including by using several, an array of non-lethal munitions. They've been using rubber rounds, foam rounds, pepper balls. Earlier, the National Guard and DHS used tear gas. At this point, the sort of face-off has come to a little bit of a standstill. Neither side is really moving. The protesters seem to be staying in place, and the police seem to be holding their line. LAPD declared this an unlawful assembly. I've seen at least 4 people get arrested just on this side. I'm sure there are more. Those are just the people we've been able to directly witness. Because again, this is not the only place where protesters are gathered. It's not the only gathering that LAPD has declared unlawful. Back to you guys.
And David, you said that some people have been arrested. Any injuries in this? Has it escalated to that point? Anything like that?
I haven't seen any injuries directly. I can tell you that some of the less lethal munitions that the police have been using are prone to injuring people. These, I actually have one right here in my bag. These rubber rounds and foam rounds, they can definitely bruise you up. They can definitely hurt you. Things like this is a 40 millimeter rubber round. I haven't seen any injuries directly. I also haven't seen any injured law enforcement. Things have definitely gotten very tense. Folks have been throwing water bottles and things like that at the police line. Police, again, have been repelling them using less lethal munitions. So things are definitely tense. Sometimes that tension boils over into skirmishes between protesters and police. At this point, it seems to have plateaued a little bit, calmed down somewhat. But to answer your question, no injuries that I've witnessed directly, no.
So, David, it appears that from your vantage point, most of the protesters have now converged a couple blocks away onto the freeway. It doesn't seem that, or is there still a large group there behind you? It's tough from our vantage point to see.
Look, from what I can tell here at ground level, it's a pretty large group. As far as I've been able to tell, at least, this group hasn't necessarily thinned out. The group that is on the freeway, I don't know if they separated from this group, if it was a separate group. I'm not sure, honestly. Your choppers would be the best way to know the answer to that question. But I can tell you for sure that the group that's gathered behind me is not waning in size or in strength. They're quite large, quite fired up. They're staying here. They don't seem to be willing to move in spite of the police's order to disperse.
Any idea if anybody is throwing anything? We heard something. It sounded almost like the police were talking about throwing some sort of bricks, weapons, water bottles, anything like that happening.
I've seen water bottles. I've seen people throw water bottles. That's about what I've seen. That's all I can attest to directly is I've seen people throw water bottles. And I have seen, I've seen some sort of person-to-person skirmishes between police and protesters where police are pushing protesters and protesters in some instances are pushing back. That's what I've seen.
And David, lastly, this is all in response to ongoing immigration enforcement across Los Angeles County at a level we've not seen maybe ever. And there's a lot of fear in the community. And, NBC News has been reporting from the border czar himself, Tom Homan, that, this could be going on for weeks, if not months.
Yeah, look, it's a little bit hard to know. Homan himself, when he gives interviews, he tends to say that they, exercise immigration enforcement authority every single day. So I think he was being a little bit elusive when he answered my colleague Jacob Soberoff's question that way. It's unclear how long they're going to be able to keep up immigration enforcement activity at this scale, particularly given this response happening that you see behind me, which does in fact, whether federal authorities want to admit it or not, does in fact get it physically in the way of them being able to go to work sites, stage their operations. It is hard for them to do that work at that scale when this kind of thing is happening behind them. This kind of thing takes away a lot of resources, and it just makes it hard for them to move. Now, that is a big question, though, that I don't have the answer to. Will they, in the days to come, continue trying to affect these large-scale immigration enforcement actions in the LA area? Because if they do, it will inevitably continue sort of, pouring gasoline on this conflagration. It's a very big question that we just don't have the answer to at this moment.
All right, now adding the National Guard to that. All right, David Noriega from NBC News, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out out there. We're going to get back to our coverage here from our helicopter News Chopper 4. We've been watching what he was describing, everyone pretty much in a standoff. It's a large group down there still. Thankfully, they were able to get most people rerouted, turned around, and off the 101.
And David is just about a block from where the images you're seeing right now. Can we check back in now with Roland Sproul about some of the developments here? Because, Roland, we saw officers move in, yet now we're seeing even more people there on the freeway itself.
Exactly, and standoff is a very good characterization of what we've been watching here at both this freeway underpass and that intersection that officers have been trying to hold down right down the street from the Royable Center. And we saw several squads of CHP officers make their way up underneath this underpass here. And then we saw a group of people actually run from the area and then back up the on-ramp, and then very slowly a number of people trickled back on to the freeway. And so we've been trying to reposition the chopper here to try and see if we can get eyes on the skirmish line being formed by the CHP. It's kind of hard to make out here as we are slightly shooting into the sun and our elevation as well. There's a couple law enforcement ships below us, so we can't get much lower than this, but for the most part, this group has been pretty much just standing in place for the most part, not moving, and pretty adamant that they're not going anywhere at this point.
All right, Roland, it looked like there was a little bit of smoke being deployed there, and we started to see the group start to walk away, but not too many people left that area. Karma Dickerson, our reporter there, is on the ground as well. She is in downtown, has been covering the story all day. Karma, if you could give us a little perspective, what you've been seeing, what you've been covering, and what you're seeing right now, if we can go to Karma.
We're showing you exactly what we're seeing right now over the freeway. It's the 101 freeway. We are several blocks back from where a lot of the activity is going on. But if you take back another look from our perspective from the Grand Avenue overpass, you can see the tail end of the chaos that's going on the 101 freeway. Those are the officers. You can see some of the flashing lights just beyond us, a couple of freeway exits down. And from where we are, we can hear what sounds like flashbangs going on. We know that there is an effort to clear people from the freeway. So much of the perspective we're getting is the same one that you're getting from News Chopper 4, giving us an idea what's going on the ground. But if it gives you an idea of just how far this sound and this effect carries, we can see smoke rising just beyond us, a couple of freeway exits down, and hear those bangs going off. From here, you cannot see the people that are on the ground, but you can see lines of cars stopping, people stopping on the freeway overpasses to try to understand what's going on beneath. Of course, the advice from law enforcement is to clear out of this area. If you are on the freeway, that's certainly what they're asking people to do, but even people around on the surrounding streets, because this completely locked down the area of downtown. People just trying to go about their daily business, people trying to get in and around the area, and then of course people who've started to clear the area and walk back to their cars and try to get home. And so it's really a mess both on the freeway and on the city streets.
Yeah, this has been declared an unlawful assembly. As we're watching Roland's shots as we talk to you, Karma, I did see at least one person throw things at officers who were trying to get these protesters off the roadway. Did you see the line of cars that were on the roadway too? They had to turn around, go the opposite way as CHP helped them get off the freeway. These were unsuspecting drivers, I'm assuming, who got caught up in this unknowingly.
Yes, and we saw sort of an unusual sight where you see on the freeway people backing up and coming. And one, I'm not sure if we're able to show them, where we can see right the Los Angeles street exit coming up, but also Broadway just beyond it. We saw cars that were pulled under the underpass and had to back up and go back off on Broadway to try to get out of this standstill traffic and trying to get clear of this area. So for the most part, at least from our perspective, we can see that the freeway is clear of these cars coming on, but that is because so many of those unsuspecting drivers were diverted and had to drive off of the freeway, in some cases turning around or driving backwards.
Yeah, we're watching the traffic nightmare right now as drivers are trying to get off the road, and then people, they're all lined up there just watching. We have people, and then in between officers, and then on the guardrail, people standing there talking to the officers, taking pictures, and then other people who were part of that crowd down below.
And it is interesting, Karma, as we talk to you, we are seeing those, we see your shot here with more CHP officers arriving, and we're seeing also the first movement of people kind of backing up as officers converge there underneath that underpass, or that overpass rather. They're right underneath it, you know. And it's just this ongoing standoff. It's interesting to watch in real time. And Karma, it seems to be completely disorganized out there in terms of the protests that were once organized. Now it's just seemingly a bunch of people everywhere.
Yes, and so much of what you see on the streets is people who clearly were responding to that dispersal order, or maybe they had just been out for too long, but people who definitely seem to be leaving the area, going about. Some people had signs, some people, had some flags, and so you can tell where they had been earlier, and they were moving away from this downtown core where all of this is focused. But then, of course, you have the number of people who are still in the standoff with law enforcement, and so there are people all over, and it's causing issues for blocks and blocks on the streets, and even the freeway. As you come here through these downtown interchanges, you can see the impact with the traffic just really just snarled, not what you would expect to see on a Sunday afternoon.
And how is that traffic moving? Are you seeing people? I mean, here it looks relatively organized. It's just kind of a mess. And earlier when we saw people turning around, they really seemed like they were desperate to get out of there, which I understand. They're caught in this situation. They want to get out. They don't know what's happening.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, especially if you're in the car and not necessarily aware of what's going on or which is the best way to get out, you're hearing these loud pops and you're seeing smoke rise in the air. You have no idea what is the best way to get out of this and how quickly you need to be moving, and that's not, you don't have a lot of options when you're stuck in freeway traffic. Fortunately, at least from the perspective we're showing you now, they've done a lot to either shut down entrances and exits and clear the backup of traffic, at least in this particular section, so people don't find themselves stuck in it. But it looks like we are seeing, I believe this car you're watching drive up now is also a law enforcement car. At least I think I could tell that from the license plate as it was driving up. So no more just ordinary people out and about driving up to this, but people are certainly impacted on the streets surrounding it.
Our Karma Dickerson there on the ground in downtown LA. Karma, thank you. Stand by and continue to stay safe. I want to see if we can go back up quickly to Roland Sproul, because Roland, we're finally seeing some movement here with CHP officers there trying to finally get this crowd off the 101 there.
Yes, and we have seen what appears to be the flashbangs that Karma was referring to. We've seen the smoke as well, and that seems to be having some effect, as well as officers now advancing to push these people back off the freeway. And what occurs to me, what is striking to me, is they may have been using this freeway underpass as cover and concealment until such time that they needed to advance. I know yesterday and Friday they were talking about people throwing bottles and rocks and that sort of thing at officers. So it may quite possibly have been that they were using this as a little bit of cover and concealment from the people that are on the overpass, from having things thrown on them until such time that they needed to advance and try and get these people off the freeway. I don't see any other smoke right now. I don't see any potential flashbangs, but just the physical presence or the physical force of these officers now, and it seems like they've gotten a number of officers into place now. You can see these other officers on this other frontage road here, and the name of this frontage road escapes me for right now. I'm sorry, but look at all these officers right now. They're all standing in place. They've been able to get a lot of the onlookers that were standing there on that frontage road off of there. This may also be an on-ramp. Let me pull out of the shot here. This might be the northbound on-ramp. And they were able to get those people off of there. So you have officers standing in a place, and then you have officers on the freeway that just by their physical presence now starting to push people away and push them off the freeway.
There are still so many people there on the side that are watching. They're on both sides, actually, but some are on the roads. And, just wonder if the traffic is going by, and it seems like we're seeing people riding bicycles in between cars. It seems kind of dangerous. But, yeah, we have a lot of spectators out there behind the officers that are lined up. But they're starting to make a move. The thing I don't see in the officers is that it seems overly aggressive. You know, we're not really seeing them like move in aggressively.
They're kind of just trying to, it's kind of slowly and methodically push them off the freeway. And Roland, I believe where those officers on the right are, those are the northbound lanes of the 101. The side road, the frontage road, Arcadia Street is just to the right of that. That's where you see that line of protesters, those other vehicles that, you know, many of whom may not even realize that they drove right into a major protest here. But Roland, to Kathy's point, you know, it seems like they're being very methodical about this. They're going to try to push them maybe up that on-ramp there to the left of our screen.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree with you. Those are the northbound lanes of the 101 freeway that these officers are standing on, and we have not seen anything particularly aggressive behavior or anything. Just a very slow push of these people off the freeway. Again, I have not seen any additional smoke or any additional flashbangs being used, and I'm going to push in the shot here because it looks like officers here, I'm not quite sure where they're headed, but there seems to be some sense of urgency there. I'm not quite sure if what they're going after there.
Well, we can kind of follow them as we're talking to you to see if they're going to join the ranks there or if they have some other area underneath here where they are trying to go. But we don't see anything at this point unless they are just joining the officers who are already lined up there or something has happened that we literally can't see.
Yeah, it's interesting, Roland. They're not south of this Alameda overpass here. They kind of have them contained, and really there's nowhere other place for these protesters to go except back up the on-ramp there. Roland, we're going to stay with your shot. Right now we want to get to NBC4's Camilla Rambaldi. She's in our newsroom right now with more on the arrests that have been made during these protests. Camilla.
Yeah, hi, Jonathan and Kathy. We're getting some new numbers from the LAPD on some of the arrests that were made during these protests, specifically yesterday on Saturday. According to the LAPD, 27 arrests were made on Saturday, June 7th. A spokesperson says that 2 people were arrested for assaulting a peace officer and that 1 was arrested for throwing a Molotov cocktail, where the LAPD says 3 deputies were struck and also injured there. I just checked in with the LAPD to see if we can get some updated numbers right now. I am waiting to hear back. And as we saw on Friday, Jonathan and Kathy, following one of those rallies, hundreds of demonstrators marched along the streets of downtown LA. There was at least 1 incident of vandalism as protesters there were also spraying graffiti on the federal building. And also, as we saw yesterday in Paramount, and what escalated there with protesters clashing with Border Patrol. And as we've been reporting, and the LAPD has declared this latest protest in downtown LA as an unlawful assembly. And as we heard from our NBC News correspondent David Noriega earlier, who was on the ground, he mentioned that there were about 4 people that were arrested there. Again, I am in contact with the LAPD. Hopefully we'll be able to report on some new numbers on what's happening specifically today here with people blocking traffic there on the 101 freeway. Jonathan and Kathy, I'll send it back to you.
We're on arrest. We'll get back to you. Thank you, Camilla Rambaldi, live in our newsroom as we switch over to Eric Leonard, who's been watching this with us. And Eric, what we're watching now, law enforcement right now moving the crowd, trying to move the crowd. I just wanted to get an idea what you think of how they're going about this.
To make a decision about where to put the demonstrators. That was, at least in the first minutes of this, the least impactful on the rest of the public. And it was pretty clear that they were going to do something, take some kind of action to clear out the freeway. The people you're seeing there, I believe, are California Highway Patrol officers wearing their, for lack of a better description, their riot gear, that are moving in to clear the people off of the roadway. It was a little bit of a hesitation to the start of that, I'm told from someone involved down there, because they were concerned about beginning to push people while the officers were underneath the Los Angeles Avenue or Los Angeles Street overpass there. And as we saw, I think we could see that there were some objects that were being thrown down on the officers. They were initially reluctant to start taking action while they were underneath another group of demonstrators who might possibly try to throw things at them. That's obviously passed. They're well south of that now. Priority given to them is to clear the roadway. We saw demonstrators on both the north and the southbound lanes. I think what we're going to see here is the officers continue to push to the south and then get people onto the on-ramp. That's the on-ramp to the 101 South from Los Angeles Street, and then do everything they can to get people back onto the city streets. After that, it's probably anyone's guess about how this will go from there. The CHP is focused on the freeway. We know that the LAPD is trying to deal with what's going on up on the city streets, and as you've heard all of our reporters discussing, they have declared that an unlawful assembly, which means they can begin to use some sort of force to try to get people out of there. I know we're seeing a bunch of smoke right now. I'm not
and at least
sure
one
what that
takedown,
is.
Eric. There was someone who they're throwing these devices, and at least one person was taken down by officers there right against the wall. You mentioned we don't know what's going to happen when and if they can finally get these protesters off the freeway. We're seeing those canisters there of smoke there on the ground, Eric. How long do you think until we start potentially seeing use of force? I mean, this is completely chaotic at this point. There doesn't seem to be any kind of sense of an organized protest and clearly people willing to clash with officers.
Yeah, it's going to depend on the actions of the people and the ability of the officers to respond. See, there you go. With that takedown you were describing as somebody who was trying to, or it looked like, was trying to kick a canister of some kind that was emitting smoke back into the crowd of officers. Before we got to this situation where we're seeing this cloud of smoke or whatever it is in the middle of the freeway, as the officers first began to move south, it also looked like they grabbed a couple of people out of the crowd that they first came into contact with, put them in handcuffs or zip ties, and then marched them northbound towards the where the CHP cruisers were parked, stacked up there, as we saw on the 101 freeway. In scenes like this that we've covered before, oftentimes there are a handful of people in the crowd that are trying to engage with the police on physical terms, shoving officers, maybe throwing things. If there's enough police there, sometimes they'll try to grab those people out of the crowd, pull them through the line of officers and put them in, detain them, and then decide what to do after that. In this case, the people that were willing to leave the freeway, it looks like already did. A moment ago, we saw that the officers were up against a line of people who didn't look like they were going to budge, and it seems like that's who they're dealing with right now. Again, most of the protesters here are just standing out on the streets, not having this kind of engagement and friction with the officers. This is a much smaller group that's decided to remain on the freeway, and as we've seen in the last couple of minutes, as people do various things right into the in front of the officers here, there's certainly a willingness on the part of the CHP to put people in handcuffs and take them away. I think it's going to depend on the circumstance. Again, the priority here obviously is to try to clear the freeway as quickly as possible, and it does seem like the folks who were willing to leave the freeway have already done so, and now we've got this confrontation brewing between the people left on the freeway and that line of officers who were there.
They have certainly moved them a lot, though, as we've been following this, and they just have the last few there, but it is growing rather contentious. Eric, I was wondering about the unlawful assembly. We've seen in the past where, law enforcement sets a deadline where they say, okay, by 5 o'clock you must go, you've got an hour. How will that work tonight?
It's really circumstance dependent. If they've already made that declaration around the federal building complex in downtown L.A., I don't know that there's going to be another one. There's not going to be maybe another announcement that now you really have to go. They've made the decision clearly at the LAPD that they are going to try to corral and break up some of the demonstrations and push people in one direction or another. How that plays out is probably going to be largely dependent on how big the crowd gets or how small it gets if people begin to leave, and also the activity. As we watch the CHP officers there encircle that group that was on the roadway and are now pushing them back towards that on-ramp, same kind of thing is going to happen out on city streets. Sometimes demonstrations organically move from one area to another, and then it becomes maybe a simpler process to convince people to leave. One thing that the LAPD has been dinged for repeatedly over the years of dealing with these large demonstrations in civil lawsuits that have followed, where people have alleged that they were mistreated or the officers used excessive force, is an idea of something called kettling, like a kettle on a stove, where the police will sometimes corral folks into an area where there is nowhere to go. And the courts have said repeatedly you can't do that. The police have to give people an avenue to leave freely. And so one of the things that we may see play out here is that you'll see all of the law enforcement perhaps move from one side and maybe a second street that's perpendicular to it, but making sure that there is a clear path. Assuming they've declared this an unlawful assembly up on city streets, which it sounds like they did, give people a clear path to leave, instructions to leave, and then we see them start finally using their physical presence to push people one direction or another. Clearly that's happened on the freeway. It sounds like that's in the makings on the surface streets, depending on everyone's behavior. If folks were standing around and chanting and carrying signs and maybe blocking an intersection, the chances of those being declared an unlawful assembly are far less than when you have these conflicts and friction between some people in the crowd and the police who are out there. That's typically when that sort of thing happens. It also, again, looks like the CHP is beginning to push their way up that off-ramp to get people off the freeway completely.
And we see yet another arrest, at least the second person in the last several minutes, Eric, being taken away in handcuffs or likely zip ties in this situation. Eric, in these particular situations, if someone is arrested at a protest, what kind of charges may they face? Or in these, in this situation, especially when you're kicking a canister directly at an officer?
Well, these are difficult cases for a number of reasons. One is just the chaos of the situation. How does the government, meaning prosecutors, prove that the person who's in custody is the one that did a thing? It's a real difficulty with prosecution with things like rocks and bottles, because how do you know where they came from, especially if they get thrown from inside a crowd of hundreds or thousands of people? So one of the things that has been happening more recently, and you might even be seeing it somewhere in the crowd of CHP officers, is they bring photographers and videographers with them whose only job is to try to record the actions of the people who are closest to the officers. That's so they can try to figure out what one person did or another. In theory, you can be prosecuted for failing to leave after an unlawful assembly has been declared. Oftentimes, as we saw with some of the recent arrests at university campuses around Southern California, decisions were made just to drop the cases after some months had passed. There were no significant efforts to prosecute people other than specific individuals where it was very clear on the part of the police and prosecutors that they had been involved in some type of particular violence or particular vandalism. So a lot of times these arrests, even though no one really wants to say it directly, the arrests are a means to an end. You can legally and lawfully detain somebody on suspicion of failing to obey an order or any number of things that happen in these crowd control situations, and that removes that person from the demonstration for the next few hours at least. And sometimes that's kind of the unstated goal, to get the people who at least the officers on the ground may believe are instigating or causing trouble out of the crowd and away from everything that's going on, and then it makes it easier for the rest of the crowd to be managed if the folks that the law enforcement thinks are the ones that are causing the greatest amount of trouble are moved out. That doesn't always work according to plan. I mean, we've seen plenty of demonstrations where the wrong people are yanked out of the crowd by officers in riot gear, zip-tied and hauled away, whether it's a reporter or people who are there demonstrating peacefully. To get back to your question from a couple of minutes ago, it's it's very difficult to know in the heat of the moment when there's these friction points where there's lines of demonstrators and police trying to push people in different directions. If some officer gets hit or a rock lands, it's really difficult for anyone to know exactly where it came from. So these situations are fraught with danger, and it's not an easy thing to manage. And the larger the crowd gets, obviously, the more complicated it gets. By the way, we keep seeing this smoke rising from this this point between the CHP officers and the crowd. I'm not familiar with the CHP just letting loose canisters of some kind of material. I have no idea what's going on there, but it does not seem like it's something that law enforcement's doing, but difficult to tell. Certainly something we'll try to find out more about.
Yes, and I'm just wondering about the handoff now that the CHP has cleared the freeway. Obviously, they still have a big presence out there. Do they hand things back over to the LAPD? How do they work in coordination?
Well, certainly the local law enforcement agencies are all in contact with one another. They typically have a command post where representatives from each of the agencies are there, and they can do exactly what you just described, hand off from one to another. Once the freeway has been cleared, I'm not sure we're going to see the freeway reopen anytime soon. There's probably going to be lots of CHP officers along the 101 here to prevent anybody that was just removed from the freeway from coming back. As far as the people in custody, the CHP doesn't have its own jail facilities. They rely on local police agencies to book people who have been detained. In this case, that could be the LAPD, could be the LA County Sheriff's Department, but given all of the congestion in downtown LA right now, they may take them somewhere else. They could take them to a police station in another part of town in order to finish a booking process, which could result in somebody being released or somebody being held for a little bit while longer. As for what happens when the CHP gets to the top of the off-ramp or the on-ramp here, yeah, there's a good chance they'll hand this off to the LAPD, but I believe Lolita Lopez is right there near Los Angeles and Aliso streets, or was. It looked like there were not efforts going on to clear people out of the streets the way that we're seeing it happening on the freeway surfaces right now. So the CHP may get to the top of that off-ramp and be done.
Eric, as we watch these shots here, you know, this is all in response to ongoing federal immigration enforcement. You know, I don't want our viewers to lose sight of why these protests have been happening. And that's not to justify some of the violence that we're seeing against officers. But do you think that this will have any impact on the federal government's response here in Los Angeles County, given that at every turn they're going to seemingly see protests like this every single day? We know that President Trump is adamant these will continue. We've heard the border czar, Tom Homan, on NBC News saying these will continue. But this is going to get increasingly difficult day in, day out as these enforcement operations continue.
Yeah, as we were talking about earlier, I mean, this puts local law enforcement in a really difficult position because, as we've been covering and have described, local police agencies have made it policy in the state of California to steer clear of any kind of immigration enforcement. The message is that's the federal government's job, that's not our job. And the rationale behind that has always been local police need to have the trust of the community in order to do their jobs. They need people to call 911. They need people to be witnesses, and if the general community is in fear of being handed off to federal immigration authorities, the rationale goes, those folks won't cooperate, won't call the police, and that's a much worse situation. So here we have a predicament where the people in the crowd here, clearly their anger and frustration is being directed at the decisions of the federal government, and yet the local police are the ones that are trying to deal with the crowd here, trying to deal with the freeway. And in many people's minds, it might be difficult to separate those two issues. You have the rage at the immigration and the federal decisions, and then you have local police appearing to do work, law enforcement work, putting hands on people, shoving people around, sometimes taking people to jail. and it has the appearance of being at the behest of what the federal agents are doing. And I'm sort of surprised we haven't heard more directly from some of our city officials and county officials about what message they want the public to hear about this. And it's an intractable situation. The CHP can't let people just sit on the freeway all day. The LAPD cannot sit idly by while businesses and buildings are vandalized and there's stuff going on in the street that's unruly and people could get hurt and all of that. There's some level of responsibility to maintain order. And again, the flip side of this is it carries the appearance in this moment, unlike many others before. In this moment, it carries the appearance that local police are somehow involved in the federal immigration mission because, after all, this demonstration wouldn't be here if it weren't for the decisions that are being made about how to use federal law enforcement in efforts to try to deal with immigration in the way that the new presidential administration has deemed it suitable. So this is a real problem for the local cops. And we've heard their pronouncements that they don't get involved in immigration, but visually, it's hard to separate the two right now for many people who are going to be watching this. And then the other component, and this is something I know has been talked about at great lengths at LA City Hall and in the police department, is the perception almost that this type of situation creates an appearance of lawlessness. It creates the exact thing that federal authorities are using as the rationale for sending in the National Guard or bringing in more ICE agents, more Customs and Border Protection agents to Southern California. The perception that the local authorities can't control this sort of stuff that's going on, and therefore the federal government needs to have a bigger footprint and maybe take actions that are more aggressive.
And that's exactly what we've heard from the federal government and from the president, is that LA cannot control what's going on. And Gavin Newsom saying, yes, we can. We don't need any extra help. So there's that political element in all of this. And I can imagine how it would be hard for the public to separate the different agencies, those locally that are just there to try to protect the public when things like this are happening. Anytime you have a crowd gathering and there are emotions, which this is a very emotional issue for many people, you know, it leads to the possibility that things can get out of control. But we want to point out, especially in the groups earlier, in the rallies that we had earlier, that were mostly peaceful. It's people who are coming out and just want to be heard. They just want to gather together to support each other. And then you have the very few who are causing a problem.
That's what Mayor Bass was talking to us last night about, Eric, you know, that it's these agitators in these protests, the ones who go up right up to those officers and clash, that are taking away from the larger message of supporting the immigrant community in Los Angeles, and that it's unfortunate. Do you anticipate at any point, if this continues, Eric, that we may hear from someone like the mayor or the governor or even local law enforcement, you know, Chief McDonald or Sheriff Luna at this point?
Yeah, so a few things there. The governor, Gavin Newsom, has said in online messages, I don't know if we've seen him on camera saying this, but just in the last few hours, that if you're going to go out and demonstrate and you want the message to be heard, doing stuff that causes and provokes this sort of reaction from law enforcement, in the governor's words, and I don't have his exact quote, is counterproductive, because the sort of thing that we're seeing now plays into the narrative that we were just discussing a few minutes ago. We've been told the mayor and possibly the police chief are going to be speaking publicly in the next hour or so. I think we were supposed to hear from the mayor a few minutes ago. That's been delayed. We were anticipating that both Karen Bass, and LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell would be addressing this very issue to try to convince people in the public that there is this dividing line between what the federal government's doing and what the LAPD and the city of LA feels like it has to do in order to maintain some kind of order and public safety in Southern California. And how they're going to thread that needle remains to be seen. But I expect we're going to hear from them soon.
Yeah, it's almost like the signs that we have seen. If you don't, you know, get out National Guard. If you don't want the National Guard to be here, you know, put your best face forward and don't be involved in something that's going to cause law enforcement to get involved, like staying here when an unlawful assembly has been declared and you're being asked to leave the area now.
And that is what Mayor Bass was stressing to us last night, that, you know, the more lawlessness there is, the more officers you're going to see, which is clearly what protesters say they don't want. But, you know, the actions are very different. So, yeah, we're continuing to monitor this. I want to see if we can get back up to Roland Spruill. He's in News Chopper 4. He's been watching this with a close eye. And Roland, if you're with us, you know, we're seeing finally these CHP officers successfully move that crowd up off the freeway, though they still have a little bit more to go. We've also seen a number of arrests in the last several minutes.
We've seen a number of arrests, and just before that, and I have to say, it's been very intriguing watching how methodical CHP has been trying to get these people off the freeway. They definitely have a tactics and strategy underway, and look now how far they've been able to get these people on the on-ramp, I should say, using a combination of these smoke grenades. I'm not quite sure if it's tear gas or what they're using here, but that has definitely been effective in getting people up the on-ramp, so to speak. As you just mentioned, there have been several arrests. We've counted probably at least 10 arrests. We were trying to get around here, just talking to the desk to try and see if we could get a shot of the people being put into cars. We did see them being wrestled down and arrested and taken away, but still, you can see these smoke grenades still being thrown into the crowd or introduced into this crowd as CHP very methodically tries to push this crowd back up the on-ramp, guys.
Yeah, it's exactly what we're seeing, too. A lot of smoke. We see the CHP there, the crowd moving up slowly. And on the overpasses, we're seeing far fewer people. So it looks like a lot of people there who were there earlier, some of them have moved. And again, just people wandering around, some of them leaving the area. It'll be interesting to see what happens next as far as having the presence of the CHP on the freeway. It is now clear they just can't reopen it just yet.
Absolutely. And Roland, have you seen the crowds dissipate in the larger sense? I know we have a kind of a tight shot of this big crowd that hasn't gone away, but overall, we did see a lot of people along the sides of the freeway. Has that dissipated at all, or is it still just as strong?
I would say there has been some dispersal of those crowds on the overpasses and so forth. We still see a number of people on this frontage road here just looking on, using their phones and so forth to try and record what's happening. We've been also keeping as close an eye as we possibly can on the intersection here of Aliso and Alameda, where the LAPD has been holding this intersection down. They have a skirmish line, and as long as we've been up, they've been holding this intersection down, keeping people from advancing, going south onto Alameda, perhaps toward the Roybal building. But they have definitely done a good job of holding that in place. And even here, we've seen a number of the crowds dissipate. I think a number of the crowds that were here trying to force their way past LAPD actually had tried to make their way onto the freeway. And of course, we see the visible results now of what CHP's been able to do here in just the past hour or so.
Our Roland Spruill up in News Chopper 4. Roland, thank you. If you are just joining us, we are following breaking news right now at 5 o'clock. Flashbangs, tear gas, rubber bullets, protesters clashing with law enforcement as they march through downtown Los Angeles, even blocking the 101 freeway for some time. We have live team coverage as tensions mount over federal immigration action.
NBC4 News at 5 starts with breaking news.
And as we come on the air right now, we want to go right to Mayor Karen Bass. She is holding a news conference. Let's listen in.
Workplaces, when you tear parents and children apart, and when you run armored caravans through our streets, you cause fear and you cause panic. And deploying federalized troops is a dangerous escalation. But we need to be real about this. This is about another agenda. It's not about public safety. There's clearly no plan, and there is clearly no policy. I want the people of Los Angeles to know that we stand with all Angelenos, no matter where you were born. The First Amendment right gives you the ability, again, to protest peacefully. but it does not give you the right to be violent, to create chaos, or to vandalize property. And that will not be tolerated. So I call on all Angelenos to continue expressing your right, your anger, your outrage, but to do it peacefully. And I just have to say that all of you were there Friday. Everybody knows what happened Friday. A workplace, several workplaces were targeted and raids took place. Now, in the beginning, the administration said they were just looking for dangerous felons, violent people. It's hard to say that that's what they found at a workplace or in a Home Depot parking lot. When this happens, it terrifies people. It sends a sense of fear and chaos in our city. And you well remember a few years ago in the last administration, the kids were afraid to go to school. Parents were afraid to go to work. This impacts all of our city. You can't terrify the workforce, and then expect for people to get the jobs done. So if you think about a father that went into a factory and now his family doesn't know where he is, the detainees have not been allowed to speak to legal counsel. That is a marked departure from what has happened in the past. When you think of a mother that might be working in a household, taking care of children on another side of town, that impacts that family as well as her family. And so this is something that I think should not be happening in our city, and I join with the governor in appealing to the administration to rescind the order to federalize the National Guard and allow the National Guard to come back under the control of the governor. So with that, we can open it up for questions. Yes.
We're going to start with Lolita and then we'll go to Chase.
Mayor, these protests that were demonstrations, I should say, did start out peacefully. We've been here since in the morning.
Right.
But then they scattered and people were moved around. Where is the LAPD in terms of being here to be able to deal with that and maybe stop them before they get on the 101 freeway?
Sure. Well, I think that basically they were overrun. But what is happening now is that the freeway is cleared. The California Highway Patrol, as you know, is in charge of the freeways. So they have moved all of the protesters back. They still might be there, but they are beginning to be dispersed. But LAPD is on the perimeter, so LAP is actively involved. You know that there were hundreds of protesters on the freeway and thousands of protesters off the freeway. So there is a joint collaboration going with the CHP, the LAPD, and then frankly the National Guard. But you also know that the National Guard is deployed to protect federal property. So there is a National Guard troops in Westwood at the federal building and also here downtown.
Next question to Chase.
Mayor Ross, have you reached out directly to the federal government, or is this you doing so right now with the media here? Have you tried to reach out?
No, my disappointment is I've been talking to the federal government for days. I was hoping to prevent this situation from happening. I was trying to encourage the administration that if they deployed the National Guard in Los Angeles, it would create a sense of chaos. It's the last thing our city needs. Our city is still trying to recover from the wildfires. And you just think about how so many people were impacted by that. And that's an example of where the administration was helpful. And to go from that situation to where we are now is just really tragic. And I think it's so unfortunate. It's the last thing Los Angeles needs.
When you say you reached out to the federal government, have you reached to President Trump?
No, I did not reach out to President Trump directly. I spoke to his chief of staff. I talked to Tom Holman. I talked to the U.S. Attorney. So I've talked to several members of the administration.
Next question, Matthew.
Yeah, I know you've been watching these protests. First off, what do you see when you're watching this? And I know that you've mentioned being worried about the safety of the protesters, but are you also worried about members of law enforcement in the middle of this?
Well, I'm worried about everybody. I'm worried about members of law enforcement. I'm worried about the safety of the people who are peacefully protesting. I'm worried about the businesses that might get vandalized. I'm worried about the vandalism that took place around the federal building. All of that. We do not need to see our city torn apart. And the idea that the federal government that should be assisting us is a contributing factor, I think is very tragic. When I see the protesters, I know that so many people are affected by this. Their families are affected by this. People are terrified.
How do you think that vandalism impacts the overall message of the protest?
Well, I mean, I first of all, I think protests need to be peaceful, period. And anytime it deteriorates into violence, that is a problem, and it absolutely messes with the overall message.
Next question right here in white.
Yeah, hi Mayor. George with Reuters. My question is, can you share a little bit about the conversations you've had with the governor, and how long you expect for the National Guard to actually be in?
You know what? Thanks for asking me that, because we're hearing all of sorts of information. We're hearing that the raids could continue. We're hearing that the National Guard is going to be here. So it's uncertain. But that's exactly the problem. Because we don't need in this city to go to sleep tonight and wake up in the morning and find out about people running through Home Depot parking lots being chased by ICE officers, or people going to work, or children at school. So we don't need any of that in our city right now. Our city's trying to heal. Our city is trying to rebuild. Our city does not need to be torn apart with a provocative measure from the federal government.
We're going to go right here, and then we'll go right here.
So, Mayor, the reality is people seem to still be getting violent. How do you plan to deal with that as we move forward?
If people get violent, if people break the law, they will be subject to arrest and they will be held accountable. It's as simple as that. So peaceful protest is what is needed. Peaceful protest is a part of our American tradition.
Right here. Mayor, last night the U.S. Attorney seemed resolute that these raids would continue regardless of what's happened over the last 2 or 3 days. In your conversations with him, has there been any kind of attempted compromise or sort of how lowering the temperature, at least will things cool off locally if they want to continue, or are they just doing it regardless of how everyone else feels?
Well, I mean, I think what we see now is they're doing it regardless of how anyone else feels. My conversation with the U.S. Attorney, though, was not focused on that.
We're going to go Frank?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, hi, Frank.
It appears that the LAPD is cooperating with ICE in this operation outside the Metropolitan Detention Center. They moved in, there was a peaceful protest. The LAPD moved the people back using flashbang and less lethal munitions. Comment on that, because
Sure.
the LAPD is not supposed to be cooperating with ICE.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm not sure that LAPD was involved with the flashbangs. But anyway, let me just say that what happened there is that when one branch of law enforcement says they need help, another branch of law enforcement is going to respond and is obligated to respond. And so the minute that protest left the federal building, then that's when LAPD were involved. So the cooperation that you're referring to, I believe, is the cooperation around coordinating with ICE in terms of raiding workplaces or arresting people who are undocumented.
Right here in the gray.
Hi, what's your exact understanding of the timeline for how long the National Guard is going to be here? How long the raids are going to continue? Are there going to be daily raids?
I have no exact timeline. I cannot tell you that. That's part of the problem, right? We do not know. I have heard a variety of days and weeks. I certainly hope that this is over. The last thing this city needs is civil unrest, and the last thing this city needs is civil unrest that's provoked.
Quick follow-up. So I've seen LAPD fire point blank foam bullets, rubber bullets into the ground, but in some cases directly at protesters. Can you speak about what kind of orders they're under in terms of handling people protesting?
I can't in terms of the specific orders that are being given by the chief or the other commanding officers.
So, Mayor, will you be speaking then to Chief McDonald?
I'm going to speak to him in the next few minutes.
Okay, great.
Yes,
So
I'm
what is
leaving
in
from
the
here
plan?
to meet with him.
Great. What is then the plan for tomorrow? Because let's say presumably this does not end.
Right. Well, you know, I think one thing is that because our city has always had a very robust immigrant rights movement and infrastructure and institutions that have been around for several decades, there is a history of having peaceful protests here. Now, you know, like any crowd, if we're talking about after an athletic event, everybody celebrates. There's always a handful of people that tend to be at the end and tend to hang around and might get into mischief and violence. But that's not the people who are putting on the protests. I tell you that to say that when those protests have been organized, they've been organized in a proper way. The problem is what happens at the end, and that's one thing that is difficult with crowd control, whether it is a political protest or whether it is a football game.
Did you say you talked to Tom Holman?
Yes, I did talk to Tom Holman.
What did he tell you?
Well, he just listened. I mean, the main thing he said was he appreciated he appreciated that there was a call for no violence. I'm not exactly sure what was expected, but I was encouraging him not to deploy the National Guard. I knew that the order had been given. The president had signed the order to the governor that he was federalizing the National Guard, that 2,000 troops were going to be deployed, but that didn't mean that they would actually be deployed onto our streets. So my conversation with him was trying to encourage to prevent the deployment. Obviously, that did not work.
And so to be clear, the mayor's going to meeting with the police chief and anybody else, or just the police chief?
The police chief, the sheriff, and the governor.
Quickly, Mayor, talking about peaceful protests, we're hearing the noises outside as this crowd is getting closer and presumably more violent as they're coming up through the streets here. I know it's nice to talk about peaceful protests.
That's not peaceful, what was happening. It's not peaceful for people to be on the highways. It's not peaceful for people to throw rocks or bottles. That's not peaceful.
So then how do we reconcile the difference? Obviously, there's frustration with the Trump administration and the feds, but as LAPD and the Sheriff's Department try to distance themselves from the actions of these immigration actions and work being done, they're against authority in a lot of ways. They're standing outside City Hall, which is your office. It's not necessarily against you. How do you distance yourself, but also kind of try to keep it peaceful at a time where it's anti-authority?
Well, and let me just tell you that I don't think there's any equivocating on nonviolence. And if you are going to entertain violence, if you are going to try to take over a freeway, then you are going to suffer the consequences of doing that. I don't think that LAPD, the sheriff, and certainly not myself, are not shying away from statements like that.
Mayor, do you want to provide some
National Guard mission is going to be?
I'm sorry?
Any details about what the National Guard mission is going to be within LA, where they're going to be deployed?
Well, what I know right now is that the mission of the National Guard is to protect federal property and the federal building, which is why you have only seen them there. You have not seen them out in the community or anything like that. And just in terms of, to close, to wrap up, I just have to say that, again, our city has been through a lot since the beginning of the year. And now thinking that there is a large percentage of our city that is terrified, that is not going to know if they go to sleep tonight and they go to work or they go to school, will that be the last day they do that? Will that be the last day they see their family? We can't have this in our city. Los Angeles is a city of immigrants where 50% of the population is Latino. A percentage of the populations are from Asian countries and from all over the world. And we embrace all Angelenos. It doesn't matter where you came from or when you got here. But the most important thing right now is that our city be peaceful. And so protests and expressing your, fears, your beliefs is appropriate to do, but it is just not appropriate for there to be violence. And I don't want people to fall into the chaos that I believe is being created by the administration completely unnecessarily. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
LA Mayor Karen Bass wrapping up a news conference about the ongoing federal immigration enforcement as well as the subsequent protests, calling on the president to rescind the order that federalized the California National Guard, saying that it was not about public safety, that there was never a plan or policy put in place by the Trump administration when that memo was signed by the president yesterday, saying it's the last thing Los Angeles needs right now, but also urging protesters, Kathy, to protest peacefully.
Yeah, the last thing they want to see is someone getting injured. This is not what they wanted to present. Peaceful protests, yes, and the mayor did say, yes, earlier the rallies were mostly peaceful, but again, not when things are being thrown at officers who are there to protect public safety. You're looking at video from earlier when cars were still on the 101. CHP has since cleared all of that. In fact, all of the protesters who were there on the freeway have now been moved off, but I believe CHP still has a presence there at the scene.
They still have a presence there, and we saw at least a half a dozen people being taken into custody. We want to get to our Eric Leonard, our investigative reporter, who's been following this along with us. And Eric, we understand you were listening to the mayor along with us. Your thoughts on what she had to say and what you've been hearing from your law enforcement sources as well.
Yeah, hi. So the mayor focused in on that, the thing we've been talking about for the last couple of hours, which is this conundrum of perception, where the local law enforcement, the LAPD, the city of Los Angeles, feels obligated to do something to restore order in some of the places where these demonstrations have veered into vandalism and other kinds of disruptions, and at the same time still try to convince the public that the actions that the local law enforcement are taking have nothing to do with the federal law enforcement mission of enforcing immigration laws, and how that seems like a pretty murky situation to many people who are watching this through our coverage here. I mean, you see the demonstration outside the federal complex because people are upset with the actions of the federal government, the decisions to increase the aggressiveness of enforcement of immigration laws, and then it looks like the LAPD is right there to back them up. The mayor was asked specifically about that. I think she took the question in the direction of why was it that LAPD officers showed up several days ago. This was last Friday when federal agents were in part of the Garment District and were conducting an investigation or serving search warrants, and then a crowd formed, and then a help call went out, and LAPD officers rushed in, and it made it look like they were all working in concert with one another. The mayor simply said a few minutes ago, yeah, the LAPD was not there to take part in the immigration enforcement of whatever was going on there, which, by the way, we're still not entirely clear on what the mission of the law enforcement agents were. But nonetheless, it has that appearance. And I'm not sure that someone from the local government has been able to give the public a clear understanding of where that dividing line is and how to separate the actions of the federal law enforcement agencies from the actions of the locals. So you also heard the mayor talking there about how the city was forced into a situation where it had to act in circumstances where people were on the freeway, disrupting traffic, and then some folks in the crowd suspected of causing additional problems, whether that's vandalism or throwing rocks or refusing orders to leave after a certain assembly or a demonstration has been deemed unlawful. CHP, we watched over the last hour, moved pretty swiftly to clear out the 101 freeway, but now that they've pushed those demonstrators to the top of the off-ramp and back onto Los Angeles Street in the Civic Center, the question's going to become, well, how long do they stay up there? Is the CHP going to try to expand that perimeter and start pushing demonstrators one way or another? The problem with all of this is it just creates more and more friction points between local law enforcement and the public, who again are there not for the purpose of demonstrating against the local police, but rather the federal agencies. I'll just leave you with one more note. We did hear from the LAPD. We were expecting to see the chief of police, Jim McDonnell, with the mayor this afternoon. Not sure you caught what the mayor was saying. She was on her way from that news briefing to go meet with the police chief, the LA County sheriff, and I believe have a conference call with Gavin Newsom. We're trying to get a hold of the police chief, and we may be able to speak with him sometime later in the day. But for right now, that's what the officials are working on, not only to figure out how to respond to all of this, but then also to address the actions of the federal government and, as we've been discussing, how to separate the needs of the local municipalities, local law enforcement from the things that the federal government has decided to do with an aggressiveness that we haven't seen in a generation.
Yeah, locally they would like for the federal government to call off the National Guard, and we didn't really get a clear answer of how long the National Guard might be deployed here. We know they are guarding federal buildings, but not really clear if it's going to be a month, if it's going to be a week, or how long they might be here.
That's true, although the memorandum that the president signed to authorize the use or to federalize the command of the National Guard troops said that it was a 60-day time period. Typically, those are I shouldn't say typically, this doesn't happen very often, but in memos like this where some directive is being given, the time window is more expansive than what we may actually see. I don't think there's any expectation from the folks we've been hearing from that there would be a presence of National Guard troops for the next 2 months in Southern California. This was specifically to address protecting federal buildings and potentially protecting federal agents as they go out and do whatever their law enforcement work work is, but for the most part, as we've seen over the last 24 hours, their presence is really around those federal facilities that were the focus of all of those demonstrations. Back to you guys.
We want to be clear, the images you're seeing right now are from earlier today. The freeway has been cleared. Just a note to our viewers there. Right now, we want to go to NBC's David Noriega. He's been helping us out. We know he's there on the ground. David, once again, give us your location and some of the developments that you've been seeing since we last spoke with you.
Yeah, the most recent development, which is ongoing, this is the reason you're watching me move, is that LAPD pretty effectively and aggressively cleared the group of protesters that was gathered at Alameda and Temple. They moved us west here on Temple, which is where I am right now. I'm about a half a block east of the Temple Street Bridge. They did so with officers on horseback, as well as using officers on foot, deploying foam rounds and rubber rounds. The protesters that were previously on Alameda and Temple are now basically under, and some of them are on top of the Temple Street Bridge. The officers basically moved the line back that way. They have a row of mounted officers trying to keep them there. It's unclear what they're trying to accomplish at this point. The protesters are in some ways being dispersed by this. It's possible that they'll be dispersed into smaller and smaller groups and will eventually decide to go home. But for now, from what I'm seeing, they're not really letting up. They're just getting moved a few blocks in that direction. But as of now, and again, this is as of 2 or 3, maybe 5 tops minutes ago, the line basically between the standoff between police officers and protesters just got moved 2 or 3 blocks on Temple to the west. Guys, back to you.
Can you describe, David, the standoff? Was it mostly peaceful? Was it easily done? We saw with the CHP, they did have to arrest a few people. How did it play out?
Yeah, LAPD was arresting people as well. Look, in terms of the protesters were definitely confrontational. They were shouting at the police. They were shouting slogans. They were throwing water bottles. They were blocking roads after the LAPD had declared it an unlawful assembly. The LAPD, with loudspeakers from helicopters as well as from patrol cars, were announcing that this was an unlawful assembly and ordering everybody to disperse. The protesters chose not to disperse. At that point, it was, I don't know, maybe an hour after that, that police moved into that intersection and pushed people this way. As far as the police's tactics, they're using, again, mounted officers on horseback, and they're using a range of less lethal munitions, rubber rounds, foam rounds, which they're shooting at the ground, skipping towards the protesters in order to force them basically to move back. That is what I describe as a standoff. That's what seems to be continuing to happen. They're just moving it, from one block to the next. We have, I don't know if you can see this over there, but we have a deployment of additional LAPD riot officers all the way on the end of that block, walking in this direction. I don't know if that means that they're going to try and push that group of protesters even further west on Temple, or whether they're just providing reinforcement for the riot officers that are already there. But I can tell you for sure that LAPD is out in force. You just heard Mayor Bass a few moments ago saying that, she's drawing a hard line on any kind of what she describes as non-peaceful protest, which by her definition includes protesters blocking the 101, not obeying orders to disperse. And that is why I think you see Mayor Bass, and the police chief ordering their officers in such force to disperse these protests. Back to you guys.
She deemed those types of interruptions as, unlawful, that people will be held accountable. David Noriega, right there on the ground for us for NBC News. Thank you so much, David, as always. Right now, we want to get to our Karma Dickerson, also on the ground in downtown LA. Karma, same deal. Give us your location and what you've been seeing unfold since we last spoke with you about an hour ago.
We're coming to you from Grand, and we're just a few blocks away from the freeway where we were broadcasting from before. We were looking down on the overpass, showing you the scene that was unfolding on the 101. We have some video of what things looked like earlier. To be clear, the freeway has been cleared, but not before making a massive mess and creating some really tense moments out on the road. These are tense moments that spilled not just into the freeway, but into the city streets as traffic snarled as everyone was trying to either get around or law enforcement trying to manage what was happening there on the 101 freeway. Officers working to get that situation under control, by their definition, simply getting people off that freeway. We saw smoke, we heard the flashbangs, and that was from blocks off. So gives you an idea of what things were like there in the thick of it. Earlier in the day, protests snaked through the downtown streets, people on foot protesting this immigration enforcement that we have seen on our streets over the last several days, and the big picture concerns about the way immigration policy is being enforced here locally. Now, something to note, as we are seeing things a little bit quieter and calmer, at least in our section of downtown, not long ago, people came up to us and asked if we knew where the protest currently was. They said their understanding is that they were going to a rally that was going to be starting at around 4 o'clock, and they wanted to know how or if they could get there. We, of course, let them know about the dispersal orders and the effort to clear the streets, but it gives you an idea that we may be seeing an effort of people coming to join something that they thought was unfolding later on in the afternoon. So an ongoing and evolving situation here. Overhead, we're hearing helicopters, and we're seeing signs of just people moving back and forth, either trying to get out of the area or trying to decide where they're going to go next.
All right, Carmen Dickerson reporting live from downtown. Thank you so much. We're going to switch over to Eric Leonard right now. He has been breaking down the law enforcement situation, really what has been going on, the role of the CHP, the role of the LAPD. And we saw earlier, as you have been watching from our images, CHP really clear the 101 off earlier. It was a real mess. We had cars that were stuck there. They were able to turn them around. Eric, what are we looking at as we go through the night here?
Well, I think we saw most clearly in that live image from David Noriega a few minutes ago. He was on Los Angeles Street adjacent to the LAPD's detention center. It's a section of Temple that's between the LAPD jail and the federal complex, which has been the focal point of so many of these protests. The fact that we saw more of those LAPD units moving in there, it looked specifically like they were there from the Metropolitan Division, which is specifically trained in dealing with large crowds and crowd control techniques. I would say signals that the department is going to begin to move the crowd one way or another. It's difficult to say from just that one viewpoint what's in store for the rest of the evening. But clearly, look, they declared an unlawful assembly. The word that went out from the police, from the mayor, is you got to go. The demonstrators have been pushed off the freeway back onto surface streets, and at some point there's going to be some kind of action to clear the streets from the congestion and all of the demonstrations that we've seen so far. How far the LAPD wants to push this is a difficult question, and one that I think the mayor was trying to answer non-specifically earlier when we heard from Karen Bass in the last hour. Where they're going to draw the line on demonstrations tonight is difficult to say. We certainly saw some friction points and some arrests out there on the freeway as the CHP officers were working to clear the freeway. Whether that happens on the surface streets as LAPD tries to move through, that might only exacerbate the situation. The mayor and all the other officials are saying, please demonstrate peacefully. I think we just saw a message from former Vice President Kamala Harris, a Los Angeles resident herself, encouraging peaceful, large demonstrations to communicate the message that's coming from this crowd here. But at some point, the line's got to be drawn with the behavior of some of the people that are in the crowd. And, we use that phrase too often. This is why we can't have nice things. Sometimes the few people in these giant crowds can spoil this for everyone else, in that the police feel like they can't stand idly by if somebody in that crowd is doing harm, committing some kind of a crime, then the whole crowd's got to go. There's not often a way to separate out the people who they believe are the bad actors from everyone else. That's why we get those declarations of an unlawful assembly, and then that's why we get those lines of officers with helmets and batons starting to push crowds one direction or another. So, Kathy, in answer to your question, I anticipate that's the direction we're going here. I can't imagine that the agencies involved here want to leave this crowd in place for the rest of the day without pushing people in one specific direction or another. It's difficult to know how they're going to manage that because there's just so many people going in so many different directions. restrictions, but it sure looks like they're gearing up to push people away from that federal complex in downtown LA on Los Angeles and Temple and Alameda and Aliso.
Yeah, we heard David Noriega say that he saw several people arrested by the LAPD as they pushed away from that federal building. Quickly, Eric, when do you think we could hear from Chief McDonnell about, how they're going to respond to this through the night?
I don't have anything specific yet. We know, again, from the mayor that there was going to be a meeting with some of the local law enforcement people and potentially the governor. So that's going to be consuming their attention for probably the foreseeable future. However, we are in touch with the staff there. We have made it clear that we really want to hear about the police chief about these issues. So hopefully sooner rather than later. Back to you guys.
All right, Eric Leonard, thank you so much. And of course, if we do hear from any authorities, we will bring it to you the very latest as we continue to follow this. What started as a peaceful protest, a few people arrested today, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're going to continue to follow the very latest. We have reporters on the ground as well as in the air. We'll have much more coming up on the NBC4 News at 6 o'clock. The NBC Nightly News is next.